about dinner in half a minute? How about a last-minute dinner party for 300 people? What about an omelet? Voila! The Omelette Show, today on The French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
Welcome to The French Chef. I'm Julia Child. Here is the standard classic omelette. It's flat and it's French and it's very lovely and tender and soft, and it's just really like just lightly coagulated eggs with a little cloak around holding them together. It's actually the perfect kind of an omelet, and it's perfect as a quick meal, and it makes a lovely little lunch with a green salad. And we're going to do all kinds of omelets, plain omelets, cheese omelets, omelette aux champignons, and so forth, and we're even going to have a dining room party with omelets. All you need to make an omelet is a hot fire, and you need a bowl, and you need some butter, and some salt and pepper, and some eggs. Then you have to have the right kind of an omelet pan, because as you saw how that omelet was made, you have to manipulate the pan to get the eggs moving around so that they will form the omelet. And this is called an omelet pan, but it's not the kind of an omelet that we're going to use. This is made for the souffle or puffy omelet, so that's not it. Now there is a omelet pan which we call the status pan, which costs a great deal of money and is of very highly polished aluminum, and it's about 3/8 inch thick. And there is also the plain old no-stick pan, and it's the no-stick pan that I think is very good to use, and they're not very expensive, and it works out absolutely perfectly. What you want in a pan is a handle so that you can grab the pan by its handle, and you want sides that should be about 2 inches high. And that other pan, I don't think the sides are quite high enough. And the great thing about when you're doing the flat French omelet is what makes the perfect omelet. Well, it's how fast you do it. An omelet takes 20 seconds to do is all. And that's why if it takes longer, if you have more eggs, it takes longer to cook. And so more eggs makes a rather leathery omelet. And the best and the tenderest one is made out of 2 to 3 eggs. And you want a pan. This pan is about 7 to 7.5 inches bottom diameter. And that's just about the right size for the 2 to 3 egg omelet. Now I have there my 2 eggs. And then we just have a bit of salt and pepper. Just a big pinch of salt and then some freshly ground pepper. And that's your omelet base. And then beat it up. I'm using chopsticks. You can use a whisk. And if you'd like, you can beat in a little tiny bit of water. I'll put it in about a teaspoon of water there. And this is going to be omelet for 1 person, 2 to 3 eggs. And then if you'd rather use a whip, you could do that, but when you beat up the eggs, you beat them up just enough to blend the whites and the yolks. You don't really beat them. So there's your omelet mixture ready. And now you have your pan over high heat, and then you want a good tablespoon of butter. And then you tilt the pan and let the butter go all the way around the edges and the bottom. And then the pan has to be very hot. You put this over highest heat. And then, just before the butter begins to brown, in go the eggs. And you should hear them sizzle as they hit the pan, and then you wait for a moment. Then you grab the pan and just begin swirling it flat around the heat, and then gradually jerking it towards you. There's your omelet turning over on itself, forming itself in the bottom of the pan. And then it's done. And you have to flip it over, and you flip it over by turning the pan upside down on the plate. I'm going to do that again because sometimes that seems to be difficult. There's your omelet in the bottom of the pan. You can see you want to be able to turn it over because that's not the good side. So you turn your pan around, and there is your hand with the thumb on top, so you can grab it and turn the pan over. You have a hot plate here, and then lip of pan just off center. Over she goes. And then if it hasn't formed up quite properly, take 2 forks and just push it together. That didn't form well. This is having been twice unmolded. It's overcooked itself a little bit. So that's a little, then you can put a little butter on the top to make it shiny. And then to dress it up a little bit, just a little bit of parsley. And there you are, and that's all there is to it. And I'm going to cut that open again so you can see how it looks. But in France, they call the omelettes being very tender, and the eggs just coagulated. It's supposed to be in what they call an omelette baveuse, or salivating practically. But that is certainly wonderfully quick and easy to do. And now there are other ways to make omelettes besides the shaken one like this. There is sort of what they call in France an omelette ménagère, which you put the eggs in the pan and then you bring them around to the center. And it takes a rather long time to do and makes a rather leathery omelette, I think. Another way, which is a good way, is what I call a scrambled omelette, in which you use the back of a fork. As always, getting their butter very hot. And in go the eggs. And when you take a fork with the back of it, with one hand you shake the pan, and with the other you scramble the eggs, tilting the pan and getting the eggs down to the edge of the pan. And then again, over she goes. That was a little bit messy. If no one's watching, you can take the sides of your hands and push it together. And then a little bit of parsley. Et voila. This omelette is done a great deal. But I think the shaking is more fun. It takes a little bit of practice, and I think a good way to practice is by using some beans, and I'll show you how this works. It's just rather silly, but it does work. Here, your first movement is just a flat sort of moving around so that to get the eggs to coagulate. And then you begin jerking it towards yourself like this. You can see what's happening to the beans. They're turning over. And then there's your omelet. I shan't unmold that omelet. But I think that's a good way to get the technique of this. Voila. Now, I'm going to make another omelet so that we'll get this movement again. I think that the more we make, the more you see what's going to go on. And the breaking of the egg technique, which I think is always fun, is a sharp crack and then opening the egg with your hands like that. And don't worry if you've got a little shell in, because it usually sinks down to the bottom. Now I'm going to make an omelette aux fines herbes, which means fine herbs or fresh green herbs. Out of season, you would use about a tablespoon of parsley, and a bit of either chopped chives or chopped scallions or shallot, and salt and pepper. There's our little pinch of salt, and a little bit of fresh pepper again. In season, you would use tarragon, chives, chervil, anything you have. Again, I'll put a little tiny bit of water in. And now, butter in pan. Now watch the butter foam on this, because that is how you can tell how hot the pan is. As you see, it's foaming up now. And as long as it's foaming up, the pan isn't hot enough. Naturally, of course, all the butter hasn't melted yet. But now the foam is beginning to subside, and I like to put it in just before the butter begins to brown. Remember that you let it sit without doing anything for 2 or 3 seconds. And then you do this movement around here, tilting the pan and so forth, getting the eggs just to coagulate a little bit. And now you begin to jerk towards you. But really that's, I think, infinitely more fun than the other types of other ways of doing it. And there we are, unmolded. And there, I think, as usual, a little bit of parsley is nice, even though you have something in it anyway. And now for a filled omelet. When you're going to do anything, the rule is that anything that's dry can be beaten into the eggs, like herbs. And anything that is sort of wet or anything else gets folded into the omelet after the eggs have just begun to coagulate and before you begin to form it. And there are all kinds of fillings, and I'm going to do a very nice one called a omelette au lard et aux pommes de terre. And this is the lard, which is little chunks of bacon which have been sautéed. And then in that fat, you just put in some diced boiled potatoes. And per person, it's the kind of thing where there isn't much of a rule about how much you put in. I'd say about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of diced boiled potatoes per person, and about a tablespoon or so of bacon bits. And then season that up. Here's some chopped scallions, and put in about a tablespoon of that. And also some pepper. You probably don't need any salt because the bacon is already salted. And let that get nice and brown. And the idea is that you make the filling ahead of time and keep it warm. And then when you're ready to make your omelet, here you go. There are people who make the omelet in the pan in which their garniture is, but I don't think it works out as nice. I think it looks a little messy. Now again, remember, even you may have to wait if you have one of those status pans, which take a long time to heat up. You just have to wait until your butter foams up and the foam then comes down. Because if you try to make the omelet and the pan isn't hot, it's not going to work. Now there goes I have this bunch of eggs already beaten up. Now here it is flat in the pan. And now it's settled, so I'm going to put in a bit of that. I'm going to put in quite a bit, as a matter of fact. That's really going to be just a cloak of egg around the potatoes. That's a really nice big omelet. I think that could probably serve 2 people. Straighten that up on the plate a little bit. And I think this little tiny touch of butter on top is very nice. And then again, a little decor. But that makes a very nice omelet. That has a lovely boat shape. I have something I'm going to put in the oven because I want it to be ready when the time comes. I won't tell you what it is yet. Now I want to talk some more about filled omelets, because there are all kinds of fillings that you can use. And you've probably seen some of the great omelet practitioners of our day. There was Dione Lucas, who was the omelet queen, now dead, unfortunately. And there is Rudy Stanish, who was famous for giving omelet parties. Then there are two other ladies who are famous for omelets. There's Madame Romaine de Lyon with a little book giving you about 500 different fillings for omelets. And then there's another, a charming book by Narcissa Chamberlain, who is the wife of Samuel Chamberlain, who wrote Bouquet de France. And she has every kind of omelet from soup to dessert. So if you want any ideas, those are two good books to think of. Now we have another idea, which is a gâteau of omelets. And it's just a bunch of layers of flat omelets with filling in between. So I'm going to do that. And this is a very good idea if you want to have something that you can do ahead of time. Got to get my pan hot. And here are the fillings I have. I have a piperade filling, which is just sauteed onions, peppers, and tomatoes. And then I also have some sauteed mushrooms with a little bit of herbs. And I'm going to make enough to serve, say, about 4 or 5 people using 9 eggs beaten up with flavorings. And all we want to do here is just to get the eggs to settle in the bottom of the pan. And then they're going to go out onto this buttered dish. You can see why you want to have a pan that doesn't stick. And there's the dish. And then here we're going to start with, that's the first omelet that's going to have piperade on it. And now we have another omelet. The idea of this thing is you make just as many layers as you like, 5, 6, 7, however many you have the inclination for. And you can make it ahead and then cook it at the last minute. I mean, put it in the oven at the last minute. That was that thing I put in. There. Now this one will have some mushrooms on top. Of course, all of these fillings have all been pre-cooked and very nicely seasoned. Then you just keep right on going. I'll make one more. I think if you make the Gateau omelette, or many-layered omelette, it's better not to make it too far ahead of time because you want to be able to heat it up. And if you have refrigerated it, I think it would take too long to heat up. You know, it's interesting, this no-stick pan that I'm using is one I use for everything. You don't have to keep it only for omelets. If you get one of those fancy pans, you really can't use it for anything else at all because it'll ruin it. No, there were mushrooms, so I'm going to put some piperade on top of this. Then I'm going to show you one that's already been layered up. This I must say, looks a little bit like a flying saucer. It has about 9 layers, but there they all are. When you get as many layers on as you want, or as you have filling enough for, then you end up with a colorful topping of this piperade mixture. That's so pretty with green, and it's green and of peppers, and it's red of tomatoes. And then that has cheese upon it, grated Swiss cheese all over the top. All of this you can get ready well ahead. And then a little, as they would say in France, a little cordon of cream around. That's where that nice, thick, homemade crème fraîche made of 1 part fresh cream and 1 part sour cream. And two parts, no, 1 part sour cream and 2 parts heavy cream. And you let it thicken. Now clean that off. And then when you're ready to cook that, put it into a 425-degree oven and let it bake for about 6 minutes or so until it's heated through. And here's what it looks like. You want to be careful not to overcook it. I'm going to cut into it so you see what it looks like. Ow! I forgot that was so hot. You cut into it just as though it were a pie. I'll turn it around after I cut it so you can see what it looks like. And this one is so big it'll serve a lot more people. And there you are. Now, I think that's a very good idea for guests. But if you want to serve really a great many people, it's a great, another idea is just to have an omelet party in the dining room. And I'm going to show you how that works. If I can find my other, oh, I guess I can't. But this is going to be a supper party. Here we are with our omelet party. And the dining room table is set up as for a buffet. We have French bread and lots of green salad. There's the omelette and cute little chickens. There's a little Norwegian straw chicken, white wine, and there's another little cute little Peruvian chicken, so that everything looks festive and there's plenty to eat besides the omelets. And now, here's how you set up for an omelet party. These are going to be fillings. These are fillings, and everybody can have whatever filling he wants. We have the piperade and the mushrooms, and then also there's cream crab or lobsters, spinach, chicken livers, there's cheese, there's parsley. You could have as many fillings as you wanted. And then you have to have a heat source of some kind. You can either have one of these gas table cookers, or you could use that solidified alcohol in a chafing dish setup. And if you do, you have to have a big heat source for it. So put it in a rather large bowled tray, a large bowled stainless steel thing with a mouth about 3 or 4 inches across, so that when you light it, you have plenty of heat. And then you have your eggs all made. And these are all beaten together, and you can send people out to beat them when you run out. And you can have, if you're just by yourself, you can have 2 pans going at once. And I'm using some very rather heavy. These were early status pans, which only cost half as much as those fancy new ones. They're very heavy and are good for a party. And now we have a lady over here who said she wanted a cheese omelet, and a gentleman who said he wanted a spinach omelet. So there that is. You just sprinkle Swiss cheese in, and there you go with your old technique. Here's a cute little chicken plate. There's the l'omelette au fromage, little parsley on to dress it up, and that lady is served. And here's this gentleman who wanted a spinach omelet. There's the spinach right in the middle. That's creamed spinach, nicely flavored up. I think I'll let that one cook a little bit too long, but I don't think he's going to know the difference because it's going to be so good. And there we are again. And as always, a little parsley will cover up anything that seems to have spilled. And you should have something to wipe off in case it's necessary. Now we're going to have, we're going to have a crab omelet. And this way this is a different way of making a filled omelet where you put the filling on the outside. So you'd make your omelet in the usual way. Always want to have a fork or two ready because sometimes you need them. Then you unmold it. And then have a knife. You can have a knife, cut the omelet in the center, and then you can put the creamed crab or lobster right on top. And again, just a little parsley to make it decorative. Now we'll do an omelette au champignon. That butter has gotten too brown, so we'll just have to pour it out. And I have a pouring place in here. Wipe it out. If you let the butter get too brown, it has a sort of a cheap taste. Oh, here comes my mother-in-law. I guess I'll give her a liver omelet. That'll fix her up, I guess. I don't know why people are so mean about mother-in-laws. Actually, I don't have one. I don't have one. But I'll make her an omelette au foie de volaille. Somebody's figurative mother-in-law. But you see how nicely you can do with loads and loads of omelets. Then, see, I have enough eggs in here to go on and on and on. And this is really, I think it's just such fun. You can get the whole family in on the act. And you could have 5 omelet pans working at once. And you could easily serve 300 people. Now let's see how long that would take. Let's see, an omelet takes about 20 seconds to make. And that means you could make 3 omelets a minute. And if you had 5 people making omelets, that would be 5 times 3 is 15 omelets a minute. And 15 minutes into 300 people equals 20 minutes. So how's that for a last-minute supper party for 300 people served in 20 minutes? So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation. Julia Child is co-author of Mastering the Art of French Cooking, Volumes 1 and 2.